All right, hey Quants, today we're going to go into looking at the three different style of Gen 3 editors, or the three different Gen 3 editors that I've been using mostly, and determine which one we think is the most effective as a holistic solution for your development needs. Let's go ahead and get into it. As an initial overview here, I'm just going to dig into the basic features that I think you need if you're going to stick to development just with the editor itself, and then get into some of the nuances of each of the editors. And then the big thing that I've been kind of pushing or promoting on my channel as far as a look ahead for what I want to do with this, once I have gone through the individual features or the basic features of each of these editors, I will then use all three of these individual editors to create a new feature for ClickAlchemy. This is not my first pass with doing this. I did it the first, so some of the, to one of the benefits of that is hopefully some of the material will not look so raw. But the first pass that I made, I mentioned at the end of my last video, if you happen to stick around for that, I ended up recording almost 2 hours of video, broken up into two different videos, or really three different videos that I spliced them together, and it ended up that one of the videos, or the content in one half of the longer video, was just trash and unusable. And so rather than try to fix that one part, I figured it was just easier to record the whole thing. Going through that and setting things up, I mentioned that I would likely do it on two different systems, because I typically do most of my work on a Linux system, which is what I did initially. And so to try and make this a little bit more seamless, since I knew I was going to have to redo it anyways, I started to do it on the Windows environment. And I found out that on the Windows environment, there was some issues with the cursor editor I had issues with, and then was there cursor issues with some of the worktree settings, I believe. I just used it quickly, ran into some issues, and I didn't want to dig into it, and so that's why I'm a little bit vague on remembering exactly those details. And I also ran into issues, I believe, with some of the worktree settings in Codex. I don't remember if it was both of those or just the Codex one specifically, but I did run into issues with that on Windows. Typically, without getting into the detail, well, I'll explain a little bit about this, because I think it's important for knowing some of the limitations of these editors. And so I think it all ties into that. And so in my journey playing with these editors, historically, I've been using just T3 code. I should probably, I think if you've been following my content, you're aware of what the Gen 3 editors are that I'm looking at. We're going to be looking at cursor agents. We're going to be looking at T3 code, and we're also going to be looking at Codex. So I have been using quite heavily T3 code and less so cursor agents, although I do use the old or the original cursor IDE, because when you're viewing files in T3 code, you need some way to do that, because it doesn't happen within T3 code. And so I still use the cursor editor or IDE for that. And I end up using both of those on Linux, because Codex is not supported on Linux yet. I am on the wait list to get access to that when it is available. However, it's not available yet, and so I just don't use it as much. And I thought this was a good opportunity for me to try it out, because I saw a few people mentioning some of the new features of Codex, and it had recently been made available like in the last 3 to 4 weeks or so on Windows. And so I think that's why it was kind of catching a little bit more hype, is because people who were otherwise didn't have access to it now had access to it, and they wanted to kind of put it through the paces. I ran into issues, as I mentioned, using it the way that I like to use it. If I was using Windows system, I would use the Windows Linux subsystem. It's essentially a Dockerized instance of Linux in Windows that you can use. And so that way, if you're somebody who likes writing code with a Unix or Linux-like system, which is going to be most people using Mac, or people that just use Linux, that is a more natural way to do development efforts, or whatever you're developing. And so it is my preferred way to use to do development work on Windows. However, since I ran into issues, I decided I was still going to try and do it on Windows, and I was just going to do it all native. And so I went ahead and I also set each of these up to work with the native Windows setup, using which by default is going to basically be using a Windows PowerShell instead of something like your whatever shell you're going to get with whatever Linux distribution you install on Windows. Typically, I'll use Ubuntu on Windows, but if I'm using, I'll use a different Linux distro. I typically don't use Ubuntu if I'm just doing a full-blown Linux implementation or installation, so that I can do my own daily driver type work. So, having said that, where I am right now is on a Mac. And so this is kind of where, this was the area where I didn't want to end up, not because I don't like Mac. I think Mac still has, for most general users, Mac probably general users that want to do development work. There are edge cases for why you might want to prefer Windows if you're gaming or something like that, but for development work specifically, I think that Mac is probably still the best general platform. You get the Linux-like feel for development style work. And what's been interesting is, since there's been more enterprise, and this has happened since probably 2015-ish or so, depending on what industry or what specific company you're talking about exactly, but there was a fairly big push to start allowing individuals in enterprise utilizing Mac, and a lot of that had to do with being able to control the systems. And once those features were in place, at least in my experience, most people were using Macs at the enterprise level. That's not hands down always the case. Some people still preferred Windows, and so this isn't a conversation about that. My point is, what has been interesting to note is that a lot of these development tools that have come out, like Codex and Cursor, and I believe even, I don't know about T3 Code actually, because I was very early there. And one of the reasons I was very early there is because they had a Linux implementation for it. But going back to the point, these tools were built Mac first. And so brings me back to why I am on a Mac, is because these were first-class citizens of Mac. I expected they were going to work without any issue. However, I don't have my own personal Mac, and so I have commandeered a Mac, not one that I am going to keep or that I paid for. It's essentially one that I loaned for this particular purpose, and I ended up standing up everything that I needed to stand up for doing this implementation. And the reason I did that is because with all the issues that I experienced on Windows trying to do this same video, there was a lot of issues. There were minor issues, but there was a fair number of them, and I didn't feel like I was going to get a good shake on being able to explain and demonstrate all the independent features for these. So while all these features should work on Windows, or if once the Codex implementation for Linux is out, it should also work on Linux, I was not able to properly demonstrate all of those. And so that brings me back to the editors themselves and where I am today for this particular video. So let's go ahead and break down the features that I'm looking for. When I say you're going to be able to do your entire development workflow in a single window or a single IDE, I've mentioned this a few times. The main thing that I'm going to be looking for, a lot of the development I do is web development. Obviously, if you're programming for third-party platforms, like when I do PineScript or something, you may or may not be able to test that inside there. Although, interestingly, I think it would be interesting to test that out, because you probably could open in the browser view, or browser pane, you probably could open something like TradingView and then also use the editor in there and then be able to test everything there. So that might be interesting for a future video. If anybody's interested in that, give me a shout or a comment about that. And we will continue, and I will consider doing that as a video moving forward. So, but for website development in particular, having access to a web browser is going to be one of the main things that you have there. On top of being able to test, be able to just like use everything with inside the IDE, which I don't necessarily think is like the end all be all. It is often the case that you want to have modularity, and by doing everything inside inside a single IDE, you're also moving away from the idea of modularity and being able to use whatever browser you want to be able to use. You're just going to use whatever browser is integrated into the IDE. But again, we're setting some boundaries here, so we're going to say having a browser window is one of those things that you would be expected to have in this world. The other one is going to be able to do some diffing of your code. And so can you see the diffs based on the changes that you made? The next one is going to be a terminal integration. So most people who are now using just Claude Code or Codex through their terminal UIs or the TUIs will be using some version of a terminal. And again, bypassing the idea of modularity, having a terminal built in would be a must-have. And then the last thing is going to be viewing files. And so you need a way, while most of these Gen 3 editors are set up to be able to essentially orchestrate agents and just prompt your way to a full-blown application, every once in a while you still need to you still might want to or need to hand modify a file. And in order to do that inside the IDE, you're going to need a way to access files. And so just a general overview of all of these. We will compare the individual's features in here. We will see that Cursor basically has all of this, and we will see that Codex basically has all of this. And I don't know if it's ironic, but it is maybe a coincidence that T3, despite being my current favorite one, does not have a lot of that. And so they do have ways to do it otherwise, and we'll look at those. So let's go ahead and take a look at an overview of the windows here. You'll see that I have I have Cursor agents on the right side over here. I've got T3 code in the middle, and then I have Codex over on the left. They all have basically the same style of layout. You're going to import a project by clicking a plus button or a folder button. And when you do that, you can generally link a GitHub project directly, which I haven't really done too much myself because I tend to just use more command line stuff when I'm working with Git. And so I was very familiar and common for me to just go git clone my repository. And then I will pick the local repo or the local folder to install from there. However, I don't know if it shows in here. Some of these do show these little cloud icons. So I'm over here on Codex looking under this strategy one here. I believe this was an instance that I kicked off on the web. And so I should just add a little footnote there that this is another nice to have feature, is remote access for these individual editors. And so Codex has that ability. So does Cursor. T3 code has an interesting way to do that, which I will hopefully not forget to mention here, but it's the way to do something similar, but it's not managed the same exact way. And so they show things a little bit different here. I will say I noticed something different in Cursor, in the Cursor Agents application, on how the UI is rendered. I found it to be actually a little bit nicer on Linux, in my opinion. When I had I had a couple of projects, since I just set all this up on Mac, some of the things didn't carry over, but when I set it up on Mac, the cloud ones, instead of having like a folder icon here, you would see a cloud icon instead of a folder icon. And so before I start getting into all the little details here, let's just go real quick and say, okay, do we meet all the criteria for staying inside the editor, as I mentioned? So for the initial test here, what I ended up doing is I'm in ClickAlchemy, and I've already set these ones up because it's not the initial prompt. I'll come back and we'll do a whole full prompt through the ClickAlchemy feature here in a little bit. But for now, what I said is I said, just make a test change. And the whole point, I did that in all three of individual editors. and I did that in a work tree. So down here in cursor, you can see I'm in a work tree here. And T3 code, you can see there's a work tree selected down here. And this is a little bit harder to tell inside cursor. And I don't know, that maybe that's just my familiarity with cursor. I think, let me see if I got focus here. So it hides that pin chat. I don't know if that fork icon, yeah, see, that's a fork icon. I can't tell that this is in a work tree from this point. And so that to me was a little bit like a less nice feature. And so when you go to prompting something, you'll see there's very easy way, similar to all these, to pick a work tree. But once I'm in a work tree, I can't tell from this view that I'm in a work tree. So back to the point here. So all of these are individually in work trees. So there's basically 3 different work trees now. They all happened in their own context. And so what that means is when you open a work tree in any of these editors, one of the things, and this is if you've done this in the past, one of the problems people had with work trees, because work trees came out, everyone is excited about the ability to use work trees. There are some nuances with work trees that make them less nice to use, or a little bit more, they just aren't, there's some I said nuances, we'll just stick with nuances. So one of the issues in particular with these when they first came out was I'm in my editor. I was at like in my case, I like to use workspace. So I'm at workspace / ClickAlchemy. And when I start a work tree, where did it go? I don't know where it is. And how do I get there? How do I now modify that code in my editor now that I'm in the work tree? That's mostly been fixed in most of these cases. Now, when you create a work tree, and I'll go ahead and start getting into some of the features now. When I open a terminal over here in a cursor, there's a few ways to do that, but I'm just going to click on the button so that it's easy to view here. If I click on this terminal, it's going to launch this terminal, and you'll see this .cursor work trees, ClickAlchemy, some number or some hash value basically. And so that didn't used to be the case, but what's nice about this now is it's opened me up into the location where I need to be. So now if I want to do my PN, and you use NPM or PNPM, whatever you want to use for your package manager. But from here, you can do your install, you can do your run, and you're doing that in the context of the work tree. Before, you used to have to reopen that editor in that, like go cd into that directory from a different terminal, and it was a very inconvenient way to work with work trees, and most of that's been kind of hammered out at this point. And so that's the case for all of these editors now. So there's a similar terminal kind of button here. They all have hotkeys as well, but instead of being in .cursor, it's going to be in .t3, and so they're all following a similar convention of how they're going to keep track of where these work trees are. And then I think this is the one in Codex, bottom panel. So the bottom panel here is a terminal. You can actually also, if you open their side panel here, the side panel gives you different options to, and we'll get into these because these are the other aspects of what potentially you could do. But my point about that is you can open a terminal in a side panel if you want as well. That's one thing I used to prefer. Just a minor nuance about a preference about this, because I have ultra wide monitor. I used to prefer utilizing all that horizontal space, and so I would tend to prefer having my terminal open up to the side. However, I found myself using since T3 code actually is the only one of these editors, I believe, that doesn't support that. I think you can move it in cursor as well to the bottom. But T3 code's the only one that I'm aware of that does not support that. It's always on the bottom, and since I tend to use that mostly in Linux, I haven't hated it because I use a tiling window manager, and what that means is as soon as I open up an application, it just immediately kind of does like a Windows snap thing, if you're familiar with that, or in Mac, you like drag your windows to the side, which is very like essentially something that Windows used to do forever, but Mac finally got the basic feature in there for. And so by doing that, I'll have a bunch of applications open. Usually it's not a ton, but I'll have like 5-ish applications open, 4 to 5 applications open. And so then using a little bit of that bottom space for the terminal, because with the way that these editors work now, I don't find myself in the terminal as much. I don't mind having that on the bottom. And so just kind of pointing that out there, but going back to the work tree point here, you'll see here it's .codex in Codex, again, following the same exact convention of where that work tree lives, and then you can run it there. And so now going into the other features, most of these will have an option to, review your changes. In T3 code, you've got the view diff, and in Codex, you've got the review button. I believe it exists in Codex. Honestly, this is here we go, changes. Changes here in Codex. And so now you can see these, they made different choices about the changes they made. But the point is you can see the diffs that they made here. And so this would be very similar in Codex, cursor agents. Clicking this, this is very similar to like a git diff or git branch icon. And so you can just click it here. You don't need to click the diff button that was down there. This is generally how I would access it. For T3 code, it's a little bit different, and I still find myself frustrated with this sometimes. If I hit escape, I now get these buttons back, but in their case, it's the plus minus, which toggles the diff panel. And so once this is hidden, you can't get back to it. You have to use the hotkey, which I don't mind because I like hotkeys, but not being able to get back if you don't know the hotkey, and it's escape. It's not like it's complicated, but if you weren't expecting that, this can put you in a state where you have no clue how to get back to it, and you end up, if you drag the IDE open far enough, then you will get those icons back. But in this small view, it just kind of just disappears, and could be left hanging if you don't know what you're doing. So these represent in Codex, not Codex, they call out the individual turns. So every time you request a prompt, that's going to essentially be a turn. And so by default, it's viewing all turns. If you prompted multiple times, then you could view the diffs by turn, which could be very useful. And then I think, Codex, and I think this was something that came from Codex, because I don't know that Codex lets you view multiple turns, but it has the last turn here. And so the individuals that are building T3 code, it's kind of a young, scrappy team. And I think Theo is effectively the CEO or owner of this particular project, even though he's giving credit to one of the members on his team is kind of owning it and running it. He mentioned that he was really excited about Codex and had found himself using it quite heavily, and then ended up pulling in some of the features from there. So I think that's maybe where that came from, but point is you can view all your diffs there. Let's go to, I mentioned the terminal access, so now you can view your diffs, you can view your changes, you can go into the terminal for all of these applications, and you can run the application or run up whatever terminal commands you want to run from there. Let's go to the viewing the files next, and this is where T3 is going to fall a little bit short. And so if you are I'm going to start on the left here this time. If you're in Codex, you click this plus button, and you have the terminal, you have the browser, you have the files. The side chat is interesting, so I haven't used it much, but I think it's kind of like the by the way command that you can use with some of the, I believe it's Claude that has it. I can't remember if Codex has something similar. In Codex, I think it might actually be called side chat in the terminal UI. And so basically it gives you a way to do some chatting outside of your main window. And so, but back to the point here, files. So you can view your files here. This will give you a file tree, as you might expect. If you click on one of these, it's going to open that here. And so inside of Codex, you can choose different apps to open this. You can open this in. And so this is very reminiscent of what I would do with T3 code, because T3 code didn't have this built in. We're going to do a little bit of testing with that here in a second and find out exactly how some of that might have changed or might work now. But this would open it in Cursor, and that's kind of the flow that I've been using. But it is nice to have it in here because the windows, let me see if I go ahead and, I think if I bring the sidebar down a little bit, just so I can open this up. So you can drag this open. Again, I'm a little bit cramped because I'm putting all three of these side by side because I want to compare them side by side. But you can view the file here. This is the markdown file. I don't know if they have a way, disable rich view. And so right now it looks like markdown would be how markdown would be rendered. If you do the rich view, then you're going to get more of the actual markdown style text. And so it'll look like, as if you were writing markdown as opposed to published markdown. Let's go ahead and jump all the way over to the right side. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know that this is also well supported here in Cursor Agents. So same thing, you have your file tree. If I go ahead and click the README, you see the same thing. I prefer the way that Cursor does it here. And when I say prefer, what I'm talking about is I have preview or source. And so this is what I was talking about. This is what markdown looks like when you write it. And then this is what it looks like when you are actually reviewing the code. So that is what you have for the file viewers there. And you can edit, you can just hand edit these files right here like that if you wanted to. So let's move out of the editor view. Let's go over to T3 code and see what T3 code has to offer here. I thought one thing I'm just pointing out or looking at right now, I don't do this really. I think there's a way to toggle the sidebar, but I don't see it here. And so I'm not going to dig around for it. There's probably similar to the diff feature. There's probably a hotkey that allows you to toggle this. I think I've used that on the Linux environment, but again, because I tend to be on a little bit wider monitor and have a little bit more real estate, I'm not too worried about being able to see multiple projects. Also, I tend to be jumping between, 2 to 3 projects. And so with that said, I tend to have that sidebar open so that I can easily navigate through. But I believe they also have hotkey implementations for moving back and forth there. So typically what I would do here is if I'm going to do a file viewer, what is interesting, and this might be kind of a downside, like a, I don't know if I'd say kind of a hit here for T3 code is in Mac, I'm only seeing the Finder, which is interesting, and I don't know how this is going to look when I open it. I expect it's going to, let's make a guess at what's going to happen, and then we'll test it. So when I was going to open, typically on the Linux environment, what you will see is you'll see when I open this up, I'll see Finder, but then I'll also see Cursor here. And so what's surprising to me is I don't see Cursor here. 100% there is a way to make that work, and I don't know why it's not showing up here. That's just, it might be a setting that I need to set I just got picked up because I've been using T3 code for a long time. But what I expect here when I open Finder, it's going to open the files, and then I'm going to select a file, and then it's probably going to open it in whatever default editor is picked. In my case, I would usually set that to Cursor because I just set up this system for recording this video. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. So let's do a little check here. So ClickAlchemy. It looks like T3 code. I'm looking at the hash here. So it looks like we're actually looking at the work tree version, which is what I would expect. And then if I go ahead and open up this README file, it did open it in Cursor. So that is set as my default editor. And it's opened it all the way over here. And you can see this could get confusing if you were using both. But typically, I'm using Cursor just for viewing files, and I'm not using the agents window. And so that's would be a little bit more easier to distinguish the two, as opposed to the current setup that I have now where I'm clearly testing and showing both of them at the same time. So let me go ahead and open these side panels back up so I get back to kind of where I was. So that is viewing files. There are some other things in here. I believe there are ways to trigger commits, and I know I was just looking at one here. There's ways to trigger commits and pushes here, and so down here in cursor you've got your commit and push. You have the same thing here for T3 code. The option to commit. Once you do a commit, then you can commit push to create PR. I do not know where it is in Codex, and so, but I am quite sure it exists. I think I saw it when I was looking at the diff view under review. And so let's collapse, jump to file. This is going to be your split, hide files, commit or push. So it's right there, or create a PR. So they also have it. Theirs is kind of hidden under the, like your typical Git operation views, which is, this is effectively your last turn here is going to be the Git diff view. And so it makes sense that it would be under there, but it's just not elevated as kind of a first-class citizen for operation. So that is the file aspect. And so you can see the nuances of those. Obviously, T3 code is lagging behind in that context if you want to be using a single application for viewing everything. And so the last part that we're going to get into here is we're going to look at the browsers. And I want to do this a little bit of a different way. I don't know that the application is going to run in its current state. So the reason why is another one of the nuances that I mentioned of work trees. One of the problems when you're using a work tree is if you have environment variables that are required, those environment variables will not be carried over into the work tree. And so once you move into the work tree, if you try to run your application, it's going to give you some kind of a warning or a failure because you don't have the environment variables over there. And so you need a way to just manually copy that file over, or another way is if you're using a password manager. Some password managers support CLI operations and they have CLI tools, and so you can have essentially environment variable template files, and there's no code exposed there. There's effectively application paths that are point to where the environment variables live. And then you can use something like a like an npm script to execute generating your env files. And so that's, I think, maybe the easiest way to do this. Also, there are other services that provide secret managements and secret managers and stuff like that. And I have looked at some of them, but none of them have looked compelling to me. So hopefully those will get better in the future, and there'll be a better way to do that. Right now, I've seen a few people talking about secret management being kind of the big pain today, or one of the big pains, because you can oftentimes end up with mistakes, and you accidentally commit your environment variable file, and now you need to go cycle all your keys because you just exposed those to everybody in GitHub. And if somebody found those, they would potentially have time to end up ruining some of your applications or causing you some grief. So I do think that's a good effort, trying to work towards an improved secret management type of flow. But back to this all was dovetailing into my preface of being able to run the application in the browser. I haven't run the install scripts for any of these yet, and so what I would like to do is look at, I don't think it's even going to work the way that I have it set up right now. And so if I create a new fork, I think it should work. But let me see where we are in the current state of getting some errors here. So if I do pm and again I use npm. If I install here, let's see if this is all going to work. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. So Yeah. And so what I'm going to do, these have some different things in them. So I'm just going to approve the builds, and this is going to create a PNPM workspace. And yes, and I don't know why this one's failing over here. Oh, I did run some issues. I might not be able to run them in this terminal. I had some issues. Not a character in range. Okay. And now am I broken? Looks like it might be broken here. Let's see if did that actually kill the terminal? Yes. Okay. PM. What if I do that first? Let's just do this first. And so because I have to do this in all of these cases, because these are individual work trees, no longer. I don't know why that's failing here. Let's see if it works. So I got approved build. So, yep, and now I need to do this. Bump, 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 bump. That's going to create a workspace, which is going to allow it to install those. And then that's installed. I don't know why this is failing in T3 code. That's very interesting. But it didn't fail anywhere else, so that might just be another hit on T3 code and stacking up towards my conclusion in the end. So let's go ahead and run this. So if I run it here, now this, I don't know by default if it's going to open. I expect what should happen, and this is might be a way that I have it configured already on my other system. If I do just, since I'm on a Mac, I'm doing command click. If you're on another environment, you would do control click. I expect when I do that, instead of opening up in my current native browser, it's going to open up in the local browser here. And so did it do that? No, it did not do that. But I can still make it do that. And that might just be a configuration thing that I need to set there. And so, yeah, and so the reason I'm seeing this error here, I went through all that the install, and I mentioned the nuance without having an environment variable file, and so we'll see that here. And so the way that I'm doing that in this particular, or dealing with that in this particular project, env generate, and so this is going to generate allow. I have to approve the generation of that file. And now, let me try this again. Dev, this should start it once more. And is it going to open it where I expect it to open now? No, it is not. But it did open. And so what I'm going to do, because you can't see it on your screen, I'm going to make sure that I clean this spot up. And then I'm going to move back to the editor, and I'm just going to, there is a way to configure this, I know that for sure, so that it will open locally. I just, I set it on the Windows environment, and I haven't done here, and I'm not going to play with settings here. Local host 3000, and then it will open the application here. And now I have the application running here, and I will not leave this running in its current state, because once I move on to doing some other developments for the actual feature, I want to be able to make sure that I'm just on the same port, which doesn't really matter, but I can't remember if I have a redirect properly set in Clerk. And so this one, we might not be able to test it here in T3 code, which would be interesting. I thought I had verified everything as working the way that I expected, but I did. I believe I used it on the other application as well. So we'll check. But in any case, I think I did. I got to do I got to generate the env again. I gotta let that file get created. And now I should be able to do pm dev. And let's see if this one automatically opens up in the local terminal here. And again, I think this is just the way the default configuration is. So again, same thing, it did not open up in the browser window here, but they do have a browser window here. And so you can go to the browser window and you can type localhost 3000, and then you will see the application load in here. And so let me get back to, I don't know. Something is just kind of interesting about this. So in any case, despite the fact that I'm not getting the proper install here, and I might be able to dig around and figure that out, we're going to move on to the next point. But before I do that, I just want to mention that there is no built-in browser. So while you have this built-in browser for Codex, and you also have it for Cursor, you do not have that same thing for T3 Code. And so that's another feature that's missing from T3 Code. And one thing that you might notice is that T3 Code is lacking in features that both Cursor and Codex already have, yet it still has been the one that I prefer the most. And so maybe I should just touch on that briefly before we move on to actually implementing the features in ClickAlchemy. And I take that back because it will take a little bit for these to generate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that up, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I prefer T3 Code, or why I have been preferring T3 Code. And while those are all generating the output for the update that we expect to implement, and then hopefully by the time I'm done going over that, we'll be able to see what the output has been for all of these. And let's just take a quick coffee break. All right, so yeah, that's my nice, yummy, foamy coffee there. And so let's go ahead and set up the feature that we're going to implement, and make sure I got the editor showing what I want to show. Going back to the browser, I got this showing. Oh, I don't like that. I think that's the one. Yep. And so I just enable this here. And so this is the prompt that I'm going to be using. And again, the feature that I'm going to be implementing here, if you have used ClickAlchemy, you'll know that there is no way to choose which model you're going to use. By default, it was using a Gemini model. And one of the ideas behind doing the Gemini model is it was one of the first tools that I was playing with that basically leveraged AI. And so I was doing that through a tool that I hadn't used before. I was using AI Studio, which is a Gemini thing or a Google thing. And having done that, they had an easy direct access to the API, and I was getting good results. On top of that, because we're generating YouTube content primarily, it's not only for YouTube, but primarily the primary target I would say is definitely YouTube. Then the idea behind that is Google has all the YouTube data. They probably are going to be very good at being able to generate titles that would be relevant or good, and also the images would be generated with effectively Nano Banana. And so if you know anything about the models, the model itself is not actually called Nano Banana. It's called it was Gemini 3 Pro or 3.1 Pro. And so so it's using effectively the best image generation model that is currently available. There was a new one from GPT, and I've got some good results when I was using that through other platforms. Because I mentioned this is not the first time that I generated this. I got some not so great results before. But again, because it takes a little bit of time for this to work, let's go ahead and get things kicked off, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about that. And so the prompt here, I'm just going to read off the prompt. So the goal is to be able to allow people to select which model they want to use. And that will ideally be able to help you improve and validate your testing. So I want to switch from using 2 static models for generating content to allowing a dynamic model selection, one for content and one for images. And so there's titles and descriptions and also analysis of the image. And then you also have the image models, which create the images. And so I'll talk about that, why I'm specifying that the way I am here in the future. But the picker should use the same style picker that is used in Workspace Crown AI. One thing I'm doing here, and this is another feature that we'll look at in each of the editors, I'm specifying the path of where I've put the application or where I've put code that I've already used, because I have already done this feature in some of my other products. And it's one of the reasons that I decided that I wanted to add it here. It was on my radar, but not something that I really ever invested any effort into. And because now I've already done it in other areas, it's very easy for me to just point at that and say, do the same thing. And so I'm just feeding it context so that it does the thing that I want it to do, as opposed to just giving it an image of what I want to do. When you provide, I think images are great context to provide to your models, but you can still miss a lot of nuances like hover states and things and minor functionality that you might not catch from a static image. And so that's why in this case, if I have code that I can point to, I'm just going to do that. Ensure all visual aspects and behaviors are the same, including the use of icons for each model in the model picker. I'll come back to that in the past. And the backend will use OpenRouter instead of Gemini directly. I've already added an API key for OpenRouter to the environment file so you can validate the functionality. However, the work will be done in a work tree, and the environment file will need to be copied to the work tree. I don't expect it to actually do that, but I added that bit to the prompt to see if it will actually do that piece. There's another thing here based on my last video. I'm going to try to remember to use the same model for each of these. And so Codex is the model that I have the most access to, or I basically get the most use out of in terms of tokens. And because I'm recording this video now and I don't want to hit some kind of a limit, I'm going to be using I'm going to use a Gemini 5.5 because I mentioned before, I've ran through this before. I was actually surprised to see how poorly Gemini 5.5 did this, which has not been my experience. Normally 5.5 does great. Because of that, I did change this prompt very just a little bit. So that kind of goes into, before I was just saying use the same style picker that's here. Well, I've added this a little bit here because it was missing some things. And so I want to see if it doesn't miss that. It's still rather fairly simple prompt. And so, I have a little look ahead bias here. And so because of that, I'm adding those things. Because I know this workspace issue, I didn't put that in my last video when I was trying to do this. And I just did what you saw me do earlier here, which is regenerate the environment files. But because that didn't work, I'm going to see, because I would prefer not to have to do that, I'm going to see if it'll copy it over. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the prompt here. And I should have caught, well, I guess I could have copied this over before. I should have done that. But let's go ahead and go back to our separate views, and do I have the sidebar open here? Let's open up this sidebar. We're going to go ahead and create a new chat. And I mentioned before, this one, you couldn't really tell you were in a work tree. I think if you go into the settings for the application, you can see the work trees you've created, which is nice because then you have a way to be able to delete your work trees. And you'll notice just have this infinite growing list of work trees. I'm not going to be doing this locally. It will be local, but it's going to be through a work tree. I'm not specifying an environment. I'm doing it off of the main branch, so the other change that was in flight in that work tree is not going to have any bearing on this. I'm going to copy the prompt. I am choosing 5.5 high. I'm not changing the speed. I wonder if I should change the speed here. I wonder if it's going to be any faster. I think I have plenty of credits right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do that. Ask for approval. In this case, because I don't want to be having to come back and letting it prompt me. And depending on the environment you're on and your security concerns, again, I just set this particular environment up. It doesn't have access to a lot of things that I would be concerned about. And so I'm just giving it full access, turn on full access. It's not going to ask me any questions. So I've got the feature in here. I've got the work tree. I don't need to specify an environment because I'm just doing it locally. And I'm doing it off the main branch. And this is telling me, which is something interesting. I just noticed this when I opened the Codex app. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but it's telling me, I guess when I logged in through Codex on the terminal, so the 2E application, it did tell me this as well. So I think this is something new. So I can just tell my application to reset. So if I hit my limits, I could just say, hey, reset. And so they give you that every 30 days. I think they say you give it two resets, which is very generous, I think. But I could have used that probably last week, but so far not this week. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off in Codex, and we'll see how it does there. And then I'm just going to I'm going to go straight over here to T3 code, and I'm going to kill this terminal. I'm going to click the plus button here, and then I am going to paste my prompt. I'm doing high normal speed. I'm going to also turn it on fast. I'm using GPT-5. It has full access. And the other thing, it's in current work tree. I'm going to do a new work tree. Now that's something, because I don't really use work trees that often. I'm doing it in this case because I want to be able to use it on all three editors without, and I want to be able to demonstrate that. Typically, I do most of my work serially because I don't want, it's very, obviously you don't want an agent changing the same file and they're fighting over making changes. If they weren't touching each other, the other parts of the file, then it'd probably be fine. But even still, once it ingests some context and then it tries to make a change, and then while it's still in the process of making that change, another agent is changing it, then it's just, you can understand how that could break everything, right? And so that makes sense to have work trees in that context. But for me, being one person, and usually I have a couple of projects that I'm working on at the same time, I prefer to do my parallelization across multiple projects versus the same project. I find that to help me with creating this separation in context for my own brain. So, and this will also be from main. And so let's go ahead and kick this off. And then now over to cursor, I'm gonna just exit out of here. I'm gonna close this window. All that said, that wouldn't matter because one thing I probably should have mentioned, if I click this plus button, and now I would have a whole nother set of browser windows that I could open. There's no browser window that exists in this context just yet, but the second I kick this off, I would have another browser window instance that I could use, and I'm not using that. So I didn't have to kill that other one, was my point. But however, at the system level, they will still share the same port. So if I try to launch this application on all three of these instances and each different variation of the work tree, it's going to open at port 3000, port 3001, port 3002. And I didn't test if the redirect works for Clerk. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep it simple and we'll test them independently. And so I'm going to say new work tree here. Select a branch. Okay, I was going to say it should have said main by default. There was a little flicker there. I don't know if you caught that on screen, but flicker there, auto. So this is one of the areas where cursor is a little bit different. Well, cursor is a little bit different in the sense that it's going to say auto. And so they have this router concept where it's going to, you prompt it and it will pick what it believes is the best model. By default, that's probably going to be one of the cursor models. I don't know how frequently it would go to pick a GPT-5.5 or a Opus model or an Anthropic model, But because I'm trying to do these the same, one thing I will say in the past when I ran this, I noticed that the composer model did a better job than 5.5, which hasn't been my experience generally. But because I'm doing these the same, do I want to keep this? I don't have the ability. I don't think there is a way here. Okay, I didn't see this before. And so I wonder if it could be a limitation to the application, or maybe there's just a recent update, because I did just recently update, where I can select high here, and then I can also select fast. Because this is not going through my OAuth application like the other two are, I'm going to make this a little bit different, and I'm just going to let it do auto. And so again, this is not a comparison of models anyways. This is a comparison of how the editors differ. And so I do think this is going to do it a little bit differently. And I think that's okay. It'll give me some variation to look at, but but we'll see how the behavior is here. And I just wanted to point out, with your cursor subscription, you could choose different models or a very specific model. Let me go ahead and kick this off, and then I want to talk a little bit more about that. So I am still going to do this in a new work tree. It's on main. It's in ClickAlchemy. I've got the prompt here. I'm not doing the fast mode. I'm not picking GPT 5.5. And so I'm not doing plan mode. I'm just going to go ahead and kick this off. So I'm kicking this off. And then I actually missed doing something in cursor that I wanted to do that I don't think you can do here. And so going back to the path reference. So in my prompt, I referenced a path to where the code lives. Something you can do in Codex, which I am meant to do because I wanted to highlight a difference between the editors here that I missed. In Codex, you can actually specify a file here. And so I could have clicked files and folders, and then from files and folders, I could have went into the Crown AI application. I could have went into the components, and then I have the model picker code there, and it's a React component essentially. And so you'll see here, I'm actually hiding it. So I'm gonna just hide myself for a split second, hide my camera. And so hopefully I didn't block too much of the view before, because that would be unfortunate, but I don't think that the content was too low before for people to see. So, but the point is, you can see that I've added this file here. I've added the file here now. And so as opposed to, even though this file lives outside of the project folder, you can still reference that. And even though I specified the path, and even though I have a project folder, you could still specify a path, as I did, and it can go and look at that even though it's not all in ClickAlchemy. And so I think depending on how you set your axis, that could potentially have some effect on that. But let me just go ahead and make sure that's done. And so I meant to do that and I forgot. So we'll see. I think the context is still going to come out just fine because it can still go find that. And who knows, it might even do a better job if it's I expect if it found this React component, I don't know that it would just pull it directly or if it would actually do some looking around to make sure how it fits in the application and everything. So, however, that concept does not exist in T3 code. And so you can do things like I don't know, I'm just going to type in one here, readme. And so you'll see the files come up, but this is all in the context of the project folder. And so you're only going to be able to get files this way that exist inside of the ClickAlchemy directory. But what would be kind of interesting is if you could do back up a little bit here. See, that's not working, right? And so it's still at the same level, but this would be essentially where I'd want to be is right here. And then I could do Crown AI, and then you would see the application code for that there, which is not opening up. And, I understand why it doesn't, but all that said, being able to add files by doing that little plus button action is kind of nice. Let's see, cursor, I don't believe has that feature either. Image, models, yep, skills, MCP servers. And so I always forget because I never use the plus button here, but I didn't think it was there. I just wanted to double check. They have the same idea behind using the app button, files and folders. And so I can't do a backup Crown AI type of thing, but I can do README if I want to, mention a specific file, for example, here. And so that's why I provided the path. And so hopefully it's smart enough to find the path because I use the tilde instead of doing like an absolute directory, but I think that should be fine either way. Again, in the past test that I ran, I did it before. Confirm, search, open router, image, generation, modality, check components, continue. And I might have made a mistake here. I wonder where the permissions setting is on here because I do not want the cursor agents editor to be asking me questions constantly. And so that's one piece I guess I missed. I didn't see it here, but I didn't set full access. And I thought I had it. It might be buried farther down in the settings, but let's go back to some of the pieces here now that we have these all running, and we'll see how long this takes. If it does take a long time, then I'll do a little bit of editing and probably cut this down. But going back to while these are cooking here, I'm going to just take a quick look at I could probably just scroll up on one of these here. So show the full message. So the prompt that I had here, because there were a few things that I wanted to mention about this. I think I covered, I covered the path selection. So we went over that. The icons, that's what I was going to show. Yes, I'll go back to that. So depending on the application that I was using, I noticed that cursor, cursor ended up getting all the icons, and GPT-5 didn't in the model, which is weird because the model has them built in. The file that I showed that you can just like import straight into Codex worked as expected. And so I thought it was kind of interesting. It looks like Codex already finished here. Let's see, T3 code should be finishing soon. I think T3 code might be done as well. And so that was why I ended up, in hindsight, I have a little look ahead bias now. And so I ended up adding the prompt to make sure that it was like pulling the icon specifically, because I would really like for this to be done. And then I could just pick one and merge in that feature. And I'm not going to do that on this recording, but I would like to be able to just say, hey, that's what we're going to do. And then when if you're trying it out or using ClickAlchemy, you get to see exactly the same thing that we did here. That wasn't the case. I definitely would have had to do a little bit more prompting the last time that I ran this little experiment. Obviously the recordings didn't work out, so that's why we're here now. But give me 1 second. We're gonna just take a real quick water break here. But I mentioned the image models, and so we'll take a look at how the images that were generated last time. We might do some of that again this time as well. I wanted to point out, because I said while these were generating, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I still use T3 code mostly, or why I have used T3 code mostly. Well, the first reason that I use T3 code mostly is because at the time, Cursor Glass is what Cursor Agents was originally called. And it had not come out yet, or I was not very familiar, or I hadn't seen it yet, or I was still getting my head around whether I even wanted to use it. And then Theo mentioned T3 code and his experience with Codex and how he found that it was quite useful. And despite the use of it, it had some issues. And as a result, he wanted to build something that was a little bit nicer. And so that was T3 code. And T3 code worked on Linux. And that's really why I ended up using it, because Codex, as I mentioned, was originally for a Mac application. And so there was no way for me to be able to use Codex unless I was going to go buy a Mac or switch over to Mac, which isn't something I personally wanted to do, just to use the application, especially not knowing how good the application even worked. And so I found myself using T3 Code. One of the things about T3 Code, I spoke in my past video about my 2026 AI workflow, the Generation 1, Generation 2, Generation 3 editors, with these being the Gen 3 style editors, which again was not my term, but something that Theo had mentioned. I've kind of ran with that idea for the separation as my own mental model. The generation, so Generation 1 was very much what I would say, kind of the idea of what I was talking about with these editors is you have everything in there, but there's no modularity, right? So you're going to use whatever browser's built in or whatever file browser exists or terminal emulator exists in the IDEs, and so, or the editors. And it can be nice to have that holistic experience, but it also can be a bit of a frustration when you see other tools coming out. Like if a new terminal comes out that's just like hands down better than anything that's been out there, and you can't use it in your workflow that you've been using. And so T3 Code still is a bit more of the kind of, I guess you go to the Gen 2 editors, and that's where a lot of the modularity existed, where you'd have these very lightweight editors, and then sometimes they'd just be thin wrappers around whatever terminal you wanted to use, for example. They didn't have the whole ecosystem built into them. And so you got to pick and choose the tools that you like the best. And so modularity was kind of the mainstream thing at that point in time. And so that's one of the reasons I still like the idea of T3 Code in its current state, is because I still get modularity. However, I also can see the benefits of somebody who just wants to do everything in their single pane of glass, and that's just where their focus is, and they don't have 4 or 5 different applications open to do the thing that they need to do. And so I think there's a lot of value in that as well. So it's really kind of a personal decision on what you prefer there. But let's see, the other thing about T3 Code, and this is such a minor thing, but I find it so nice that it's almost annoying that the other IDEs or editors don't have it. And that is, if you have a favicon or some image icon that represents your application within the code base, and T3 Code can find it. If it's a favicon, it's very easy for it to find it, and it will use that as the icon for the application, as opposed to just like a basic folder structure. And to me, that is just such a no-brainer thing to do. I don't know why everybody wouldn't add that feature. And again, since T3 Code is it's not small by any means. It's been forked a ton. So if you look at the GitHub metrics, T3 Code has been very popular. However, in the larger scale compared to something like Codex or Cursor, it's still kind of low man on the totem pole there. But, young teams that are scrappy tend to, in my opinion, put a lot of finesse in the work that they do in their craft. And I think that just is shown by the fact that you have these icons here. And so it's a very minor thing, but it is also, in my opinion, like if I was going, if you, on my Linux installation, I do have a large list here because I have a lot of applications that I've been working on. Instead of just looking at a list of folders like you would see over in here at Cursor, or similarly a list of file things, whatever these clipboard looking things are here in Codex. I think if you have brand recognition for the project you're looking at, perusing the icons, I don't know, it's probably not saving you like hours a day or anything like that, of course, but it is just an experience thing that just makes it nicer to use. And I like pretty UIs. And so you'll notice, I think you would notice that all these UIs have a fairly similar layout. My personal preference, and I do think the design can be quite subjective, is that that T3 code has the better looking UI. There are a few things that I mentioned, like with the disappearing of buttons when you click on the diff here, that make it a little bit less obvious to use. But I also like to use the key combinations or hotkeys, so I don't think that that's necessarily a bad, the wrong choice. It's just less accessible to somebody who might not work the same way that I work. And so that's so far is why I've been using T3 code. We'll get back into that a little bit more. It looks like all of these are finished. And so before I start digging into seeing if I can make this all work, or if it is all working, I had zero problems with this working in my previous videos, which is a little bit unfortunate. That's not true. Actually, Codex was kind of didn't work at all on the Windows installation in the context of a work tree, and it was just exploded. And so I kind of did that video and said, hey, you can't use Codex. I mean, it's lost based on that. And so that's one of the reasons I said, it's worth the effort to go ahead and give it a full shake and run it through on the Mac, which was the initial intended implementation for it. So let's go ahead and, it looks like these are all done now. And so I did get through all my rambling that I wanted to get through, and that was all about the same time. So I'm just taking a look here and making sure that this loads up the way that I wanted to. Okay, perfect. What is not showing here? Oh, yes. Okay. And so I am going to very quickly start up a... did I run this yet? I want to start the dev server, and I'm doing this off screen in a different window. Is it not? Oh. Okay, I think it might be the case that I have... Did I leave this running in one of these? I thought I killed it in all of them, but it looks like I might have. So I'm just making sure that I killed, as I mentioned, I wanted this all working on port 3000. And so if I'm seeing it running, it looks like, I wonder if Codex is one thing Cursor has a tendency to do that's a little bit annoying. I wasn't reading the output here, and I even might have approved it to run it, but I think it looks like one of these might be running on port 3000 already. So I'm just going to quickly kill that. So let me go ahead and kill that, and then a few things that I am quite sure I'm going to need to do here is, so I'm in here, I'm going to start over here on the Codex side, and I'm going to open the terminal, boop, and for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and, so this opened in the work tree, I'm going to do an ls in this directory, and I'm going to do an ls-la, is that right? Yep. And make this window slightly larger. And what I'm looking for here, ooh, I do see the local file, the env.local file got carried over. And so this should work out of the box. I wonder if I can just do pmp dev. Let's see, click killed. Okay, pmp dev. I don't think it did the installation. I guess it wouldn't. And so I'm just going to go ahead and run it. Nope. Approve builds. need to read about that a little bit more, because I don't like that I have to do that every time. And I think I fixed it in one of my applications before, but I didn't really read the research about that. So I need to kind of probably understand that a little bit more. So, and we're going to do this in the context of this editor. So right now we're in Codex. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to size up Codex here. And so make that big, and let me pop down here. I want to make sure that I can see the screen that I want to see. So I am looking at Codex here, and then we're going to open our browser window. We're going to open the browser window, start browsing. Let's see. There we go. I clicked it and it opened, which is great. Let's see. And because I want to see the change here, we'll do test. I think this is the one that I have. Give me a second to give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up make sure I have my proper sign-in credentials for this. And then that way I can sign into the application. I thought I had it. That was one of the reasons when I signed in before. I was the session was stuck around, and I thought it was going to do that again, but it didn't, so that's okay. I'm not particularly worried about these throwaway email addresses being exposed. And then never save any of that. That's kind of fun that you say never, and then it's like, no, I'm not going to let you never save that. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to hide this for just a minute. Pop over to the right one. All right, I don't know why that's being flaky, but we're gonna get there eventually. I will hide this just for a minute, because despite not being too worried about the email address there, I still don't want to make it too easy by giving away codes that also shouldn't matter. All right, so we have the application running now. What I'm looking for here is I'm looking for how the model's changed. And one thing that I will note, I did do this before, so you don't have to watch me type in for a new project here. But these are the images. I wanted to share this. So the first, now we have the ability to select from a concept. It's put it up here on the right. You can see that there's an artifact here where the positioning is not lined up correctly. And so I don't really like that. But if I click on it, do we get the models? And it's not showing any of the models. And you know what? It's because I didn't run the backend functions. So let's so this is going to push up the code to a development environment in Convex. And then that way the backend should actually work. We'll have to refresh the page, but while this is uploading, which is taking a little longer than I would have expected, but I just wanted to mention, since I did run these before, the middle image here, which in my opinion was hands down the best image, and this is the one that I did when I was only looking for, I just did T3 code and cursor glass on my environment, and then I was going to do the other one. And then I chose this one, which this was the GBT 4.5 image 2 model. This image will open up into, and this is one of the other things that I mentioned, you can, as far as I can tell, you can only open one browser window. Will it let me open another one? Okay, so it's letting me open another one. That was an issue that I had on Windows, where it would not let me open multiple browser windows. And so I considered that quite a big problem, but it looks like it's working here. And so the image, but the point I wanted to make here is this image came out square, and so it didn't respect the aspect ratio of the image that I had selected, because I had 16:9, but the image itself I thought was fine. And then this was the latest GBT 5.5 model, which was just terrible. It looks so fake. And so I have used that image model for other things, and I did not experience such a poor quality image. But all that said, ClickAlchemy has been using effectively the Nano Banana Pro model, the latest one for that, and that's, in my opinion, was still the best model, hands down. And so now let me go ahead and I'm going to refresh the page here. I'm just going to click the button over here to refresh. I think if I do Control or Command R, it should work, but let's make sure we get our models here. And now we're getting our models from the model picker, which is what I expect. So this is great. Oh, this is kind of nice, because I don't think I remember seeing this last time. So if I'm looking at this in Crown AI, you don't, like, I have this kind of orangish color, which is definitely a ClickAlchemy type of branded color. And so in Crown AI, I think it's just doing like kind of a different gray tone or lighter gray tone on the hover, which I think is fine. It's kind of like this, right, on the selected one. But I do prefer this kind of highlighted color matching the ClickAlchemy brand. And so that's pretty nice. I can filter here, and I can pick an Opus model if I want to pick an Opus model. And any other model that's available here. I don't know if it shows. Yeah, here we go. It says showing 80 of 339 compatible models. And so that's one of the benefits of using something like OpenRouter, is that you'll be able to, it's not subsidized by your OAuth application, which I wouldn't be able to ethically do that through ClickAlchemy anyways. You got to pay API pricing for that kind of thing when you're selling things like this. But the point about that is, in any case, I can now have access to all of these different models to test out which one produces the best titles or the description. Really, we have that whole templating system built in, so the descriptions really shouldn't change that much. I don't think you need a smarter model to be able to do that kind of thing. But you know, if you think you can get better titles, which in some basic tests that I've ran, I do think Opus, despite my theory about Gemini having access to YouTube and producing better titles, I think just as a personal preference, which isn't data driven, I thought Opus produced some better titles. And so you could use that here. And having said that, you could still use Opus for generating the title, but then go back and use the Gemini for generating your description or whatever else. And so it did pull in the icons. This is the thing that didn't work last time. So you'll see these individual icons. Some of these, like Perplexity, should have an icon. And so this doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it pulled in icons for everything. I don't know that Amazon, this looks new to me. I haven't really seen this model. So ByteDance has an icon. So some of these, it looks like it didn't get all of the icons, but it did get most of the icons. And so, which one was this? Meta. Oh, I get it. I don't think that's the right icon, but got the GPT model one. It got the Anthropic one. It got the Gemini one. Those are all as you would expect. And so this came across fairly well. The placement up here before in the other examples, and this is again why I said I just want one for the content and one for the image. I had 3 different variations and 3 variations of how many of these pickers it put in here, because you technically could have a picker for the improve button, the title button, you could have a picker for the generate description button, you could have a picker for the analysis on the thumbnail button, and then also the image generation. And I just don't think that it's a great experience to have model picker buttons everywhere. And so this is what I was saying, like you could pick whatever model you want. So if I wanted Opus, it's because I have, go back to all Opus. If I wanted to do Opus 4.6 for the title, I could click the title and then I could change it back to the default Gemini model here, and then go down and generate my description and do the rest of the things there. So so there's that. We got this one done. It's working. I'm not going to run any tests. I just want to see the visual layout here, because we have 3 others to look at. So let's go look and see how the other ones did. And so I'm going to kill this. I'm going to exit out of here, and then I'm going to kill this so that I have that port open again. And then I am going to bring this back down to size. I'm switching back over to the T3 code model. I'm a little bit concerned that this one is not going to work because of the issues that we saw when I ran the other one. So, and PMPM didn't seem to be working, so that was a little bit interesting. Hopefully, I do not know what that means. And so what I might do is move forward on this one. And that's interesting because I'm quite Theo and those guys I believe are mostly using Mac, and so I'm surprised that this doesn't work. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over to, I'm going to see if I can get a quick fix on this. And let's run real quick before I go too far here. I am gonna try and do PMP install. I don't know why that's doing that. It's kind of, maybe it's working and I'm just, yeah, maybe it is working in OMZ. I think that has to do with a Z8 like a Z shell config get prompt. I'm quite sure that's what it is. I have a Z shell commit prompt that for some reason is not working in here, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. So let's go ahead and if I need to fix it, I'll see if I can throw a prompt to get it fixed while we're looking at the other one, but it seems to be working okay now. So PMP dev, and we are in the right, we should be in the right work tree. And so talking and typing at the same time, not always the best. So I want to make sure I push this up. And I have this browser open, which is interesting because now it's showing in Codex, which is what I expect, but that's not the experience that I would use. And so let me make sure that I can see what everyone is seeing here. And so what I'm going to do here is, could not find, oh, that was the other thing. I wanted to check and make sure that the env variable file got copied over. and it looks like it probably didn't. This is, well, since I'm not doing the comparison anymore, I'm just going to make this big. And I did LA. I do see it there, so it should be there. Let's see if it's running. I wasn't really paying too much attention to the air. Okay, it looks like it's working. So, and then the next thing that I'm going to do, because the way that I would actually end up using this is I would end up doing this through just my default browser now. And so that's what I'm going to do. And so I'll turn that browser on, and it looks like the session did stick. So that's good. Oh, I must have the wrong window selected. So give me 1 second here. We will get this, make sure that the right window is showing here. And so now we have the right window showing, and it looks like the session persisted. So if I go to the dashboard, I should see what happened this time. And so now the layout is a little bit different. It says, I actually, and this is one thing, the inline selection versus the out of line selection. I didn't see, pretty much the last time I did this, it was all inline selection. And I was considering myself if I would be the better to do it kind of at a more global level. There's some ugliness, obviously, about this, and that is this caret down here is not in the right spot. I kind of like the idea that we just have the AI model selection out of band here for everything, because then it doesn't clutter up anything that was already here. There's obviously some room for putting some things there. I don't like the exact placement of this because it just linked videos and AI models. I mean, that's a lot of extra space there. I might do a little bit of like just change up how these are lined up, but I do kind of like this out of flow. So all that said, despite the fact that I said, hey, we might be able to get away with doing this, in one shot and then just pushing it up, I think so far with both of the ones that I've said, I'm personally just gonna want to refine the layout a little bit. But this one so far actually looks like it didn't pull in the colors, which, or did it? If I select one, nope. It didn't pull in the colors, which I liked. It looks like it does have some color here now that it's selected. So that's interesting. I've got the default one here. It does default. So I might pull the highlighting. So again, I might end up, and this is one of the benefits of potentially using multiple iterations. I like that orange color on the other one, so I might go ahead and pull that in. But the one thing that they did do here that looks like it kind of nailed it across the board was it pulled in the proper icons. Moonshot, that's Grok. This should be the Mistral. Meta, that's the proper icon for Meta. I was like, I thought that other icon, Perplexity. I think that's the proper Perplexity icon. This should be an Open Router icon. And so, yeah, these are like Open Router stuff. Yeah, these ByteDance, yeah, that's right. Is this ByteDance too? That's interesting that it came up. And again, the way that this is pulling in is kind of aggregating it based on how Open Router splits things up. But this all looks pretty darn good, and it looks like it got the model for just about everything. I think there were some that were just, there was no icon for, and so in that case, it's pulling these ones, so I'll have to double check those, but ultimately, should have that 339 models. Yep. That won't be the number of models when I release this, because I won't put out models like the fast version of Opus, for example, because it does the same exact thing as 4.7. It just costs more. And one generation of that could cost over $1, which just makes the product not viable, right? And so my whole point about doing this was to make this a product that somebody could just, who wants to use, it really is geared towards, you want to, if you're a veteran, you can use it for sure. But and that personally, I use it myself, and I wouldn't consider myself a veteran, although I do have a lot of videos out now. I would say my success doesn't qualify me as a veteran in that context, but the idea was to help simplify, create a simple workflow for people that you should be creating all this metadata stuff, title, description, and all that, and thumbnails, and people didn't know how to do it. And if that's what's holding you up on getting started on your content, then this is a cheap way to get in and not let that hold you back. So anyways, this looks good. I like the overall idea. So we'll leave it here for that one. I guess the one thing that I will say is the image models, because I didn't look at the other one. This should be filtered. Yes. And so 37 models. And so you'll see this is only image capable models. And so you're not going to get all the other models. And then this is the one that I mentioned. It actually didn't produce a bad image, but the image 2 did, but it did not respect the aspect ratio. And then the GPT one, I'm just going to select it here because there was the 5.5 GPT image 2. I'd have to look. I think there's some latest image. Yeah, so maybe this is the one that I missed for some reason on the other one. So I'd be curious. Maybe we should go ahead and create a generation on this and see how it looks. Let's do that. Image 2. That was the one I think I used before, and it just produced that junky image. So I got image 2 selected. We're going to go ahead and do a cinematic version of this, and hopefully it'll look better than this one, but it'll take a little bit of time to generate, and I might not wait around for it because the one thing I had noticed is that well, that failed. You don't, oh, I don't have credits. Okay. On my test account, it's just a free account, so I have to go and put in like the test credit card or whatever, so I'll do that later. But if the image quality comes out better for that, then I'll use it. Otherwise, I'm curious if this would be better or if this is the same one, because I think that might still be the GPT 5.5, but I don't remember seeing the GPT 5.5 image 2 version. And so that could have been with the old one. Maybe this is just missing on the way that it filtered some things. All right, so that was in the original browser. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to hide this browser because I shouldn't need this again. And I'm going to go back to the cursor glass model, and I'm going to blow this one up because this is where we're going to be now. And so going back to the things that I said, and one thing I will say, in both cases, they both copied over the environment variable file, which is really nice. And so that's something. Did you not open up the terminal? Why are you doing that? Hopefully things are not getting sticky over here. Oh, is this? It is. Windows not responding. Okay, I'm going to do this for a second because it seems like we're crashing the application. I'm going to go ahead and I don't know what's going to kind of go crazy here. So let's do this. I'm going to hide all these windows for the time being. T3 code. And then I'm going to reopen this application, and then I'll reshare it once things are working the way I expect them to be working here, which it's already up, so it should be good. Let's go ahead and I'm just resizing it back up. I'm opening the terminal, and we are there. And then I'm going to come back here, and let's make sure I'm going to hide all these other ones and make sure. I hope I didn't mess up and hide one of the other ones, because Codex was, I think Codex was flowing over the T3 code maybe, but I think everything still worked out okay. So let's see. So back to, it's not okay. Oh, what are you doing? Keep waiting. Window is not responding. I don't understand why you would be struggling right now. T3 code. Did I kill these? I didn't, so I do want to do that. All right, we're going to hide that. so interesting that I'm having these weird problems. Gonna quit cursor. I'm gonna go ahead and hide this one more time. And open it back up. If this doesn't work, then we just won't do the whole one UI experience, which is really unfortunate because that was kind of the whole point of being able to demonstrate the benefits of using one of these. And then if somebody from Cursor catches this video and they see it, they can tell me when it's fixed, and maybe we can redo something again. But this window is not functioning properly, and I cannot tell why. So yeah, it seems like the Cursor application is flipping out. And so I guess maybe that's another reason why I use something like T3 Code, because I haven't been experiencing these kind of problems that are just silly problems I would not expect to experience with these quality of applications. That's very interesting. I guess I did run an update this morning. I wonder if that's causing some issues, but other than that, I can't really. It's hard for me to understand why these, why these applications are bombing out like this. They really shouldn't be. So we're killing some stuff, trying to see if we can make it work. And the whole point of moving over to Mac again was because these things. Now, I will say I didn't have any problems running this stuff when I was on a Linux system. So I'm not going to say Linux is better, but proof's in the pudding, I guess. Here's what we'll do. Because I still do want to demonstrate what the end result of this one was. And if you recall, this was an implementation that was done by the Cursor application. I don't know why. It is really mind-boggling that... okay. I'm going to just end up wanting to say bad things about these applications, which is not a great reflection of my own character here. So I'm going to bite my tongue. And we are going to set up a new way to view this. So because the Cursor application is not working, and that's really unfortunate, because I will say Cursor has been my recommendation for pretty much anybody trying to do stuff like this. And I don't remember which one the work tree was. I think it was 4SS. Let's see. I do need to launch the application one more time because I don't remember which work tree I was on, and I want to see real quick. Oh, is it working now? So weird. So I got the fix. The fix is to restart the application 6 times, and then it should work. All right. Or not. It actually isn't. Okay. It's 4RRS. Okay, it's still not working. All right. Well, that's... And again, I think this is one of the reasons why you have somebody like Theo suggesting that why he decided to go ahead and build something like T3 code is because you use these applications, and although I haven't had any of these problems on Linux, an environment like Mac, which is generally most of these applications are like first-class citizens of these applications, you expect them to work very well. And in this case, it did not. So, man, this is a monster stream. I thought I was going to go faster. Let's go ahead and get to 4RRS, clear. And so I guess we're close to about the same time as what I did with the other ones, and I feel like I still showed all the right stuff. So let's, what we're going to do here is, because I know the path of where the work tree was, I've CD'd into that directory, and I'm just going to do the ls, and I know you can't see this on screen, so I didn't miss that. I want to see if the environment variable got copied over. It did. I'm going to run the PMP. You've already seen this before, so I'm not doing anything magical here. I'm doing the PMP install. And then I got to do the PMP approve builds, and I'm going to do some research and remember why I have to do that. Oh, that's interesting. It looks like it pulled down the Open Router SDK, and the other ones, I don't think the other ones did that before, and I do remember kind of fixing that before. So I think I'm going to check out what the workspace looks like now. So yes. Yeah, it didn't have the Open Router SDK. I think the other ones didn't have that before. So that will be something that, again, I've done this now 3 different times, and I have something from each one that I forgot or that I just liked better. And so again, this is just why you might want to create 3 different implementations. But I would, I've ultimately going to end up taking something from all 3 of these pieces now to create the feature, which normally I wouldn't go through that level of effort for everything, but is a perfect example of why doing this, going somewhat slow and checking out all these features, the differences in the features can sometimes help you. So let's go ahead and do dev. I'm going to do the dev context, and then I'm going to, and I'm in my Ghosty terminal right now. And so because I don't have that set up to stream right away, I'm not going to bother doing that. Deep dev, and then this should launch. I'm going to open this in Zen. And so now, the same way that I was in T3 code, this is not how I wanted to show it, because I've actually found the cursor experience to be my favorite. I now don't feel like I can recommend that as the ideal option if you're inside a Mac, but I think if you're on a Linux environment, you're probably good. And so let's see if we got them. So here's the location for the content model. If I click on it, it looks like the backend stuff did not take because it didn't pull that up. So let me just go real quick, and yeah, it looks like the schema validation failed when it tried to push. So let's see if we can do this again. All right. Well, I can't. And so this is a little bit unfortunate, because it said the schema validation failed. And so if you recall, I used Codex, or I used the cursor model for this one. And so what I can do here, though, is I can open up Codex. I'm going to not do this right now because it's asking me about an update. And then I'm going to paste the errors in here. I'm going to see if I can get this fixed with OpenAI or with Codex real quick. And then I'll try to push it up so that we can see. The thing that I'm curious about here is if it got the things that we've been covering, which is the different icons and then like the highlighting and stuff like that. Those were some nice things. Something else I didn't check is the hover states. And so the other one does have specific hover states. So if it's on a smaller screen, where is the image model? So the image model is right here. So I think I'm on the fence about whether I like it in line or out of line, because it's nice to have it kind of co-located here. This at least it got the caret placement right, which is nice. But this is a giant select box. I would not put this out in its current state. I would fix the layout for this. And one thing I consider doing, but I won't do it on stream right now, is telling Codex or one of the AI models to use the Claude-P command for design skills. And so I'm probably going to do that after this, just to kind of refine it a little bit more. But ultimately, we have these multiple ones where we had slightly different placements. Since I think that gets the gist of what I wanted to do. Well, I'll just do my conclusion now, and then if there is a way to, it says it's fixed the def failure. Okay, let me see if I can push it real quick. It's still doing stuff, but I don't know if it's completely done. So pushing, because I just want to I really would like to finish all of it, and it looks like it's done. Cool. And I don't see the failures, so refreshing the page. All right, now let's see, did the image generation model, so it looks like it did get all of the proper icons. Yep. Baidu, is that ByteDance? No, Baidu, okay. So it looks like this is ByteDance, I think, yeah. So it looks like you got all the models. That's good. What was the default selection when I was up here? Default selection. You got some hover state. The color is not terrible, but it should. I liked it when it matched the orange. So this is pretty close. And so those are all pretty good. What about the hover states I mentioned? So this should tell me Anthropic. One thing, these look like they're using basic title tooltips. And I believe I had it set up to use like some ShadCN stuff. So it should look a little nicer than it does now, but this isn't terrible, totally workable. And so I'll probably come back and end up combining all of these. That font, I'm not sure if that font looks quite right. So all that said, we got all this working. The filtering on the image model here should be in there. And so so again, as I mentioned before, I think before it had 30 some models in the other one. It looked like in here they missed a number of models. So I'll have to do some research on that, or digging into both of those and see which one's best or what the proper one is. But let's go ahead, and I would like to go ahead and show all three editors again, but I don't know that I can properly do that because the editors, I stopped them all in an attempt to try and get cursor working. And so I'm quite I did just update cursor before I started the stream. So I'm wondering if that was kind of the downside of that. And so let me go ahead and pop up cursor here. Wow, I don't know what that is. T3 code. I have no idea what that's doing. So I'm not gonna let it do crazy things right now. So we will just hold it where it is for the current stream, and do our quick conclusion here. So for the conclusion here, we've got. Let me clean up my screen real quick, just because I don't want things flashing around and weirding me out. Yeah. So, which one's the best editor? I think it's platform dependent. That's what I'm gonna have to say, because I've used them on Linux. If you're on Linux, I think for the general person, cursor is going to be your best option. Unfortunately, it was not a good showing here, but I've been using cursor for probably I don't know, since they came out. So probably close to 2 years now without any issues on Linux. And I still use that. And my conclusion from my last video was essentially that I was going to give Cursor a more of a go to try that single pane of glass look and workflow. And I probably will still do that. But I don't know if I'll give it the same shake that I was originally planning on giving it. I'm quite disappointed the way that it played out here. So if you're on a Mac, I cannot tell you hands down to go use Cursor, because I'll probably spend a little bit of time to figure out why it wasn't working in my case. But right now it's just exploded on my environment, and I have no idea how to get it fixed other than potentially rolling back the latest version or waiting for the next version to update and then seeing if it just happens to be fixed. So that was a poor showing on Cursor's part. And we were already there, all the way there, basically. We just had a couple of things left to do and we were going to be good to go. And so I can't believe it blew up there. Codex was a great showing on the Mac platform. So I think if you're on Mac and you want that single pane of glass, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, I think Codex is a good option, very good option. T3 code, if you want to go modular, there was no issues running T3 code that I saw. I have the Z shell issue in mind that I don't expect anybody else would experience. I will fix that. I will probably fix that as soon as I get off of this recording here. And so, because I will still stay on Linux, I'm not going to be jumping over to Codex. If I was on a Mac, I might go ahead. I might end up using Codex as that seamless experience to see how that worked. One thing that I didn't get into, now that I'm thinking about it, is the remote implementation or remote access for all of these. So that is a very important aspect. And I will say T3 Codex, I didn't point it out, but if you look in the menu items, they do have a section in there for doing stuff in a remote manner. And so you can definitely, I'm looking at it right now to see if I can see what they have on there. So they do have a way. I showed the cloud icon, so you can go through their web interface to go kick things off. One thing I don't really see with these and I haven't tested them out. If you don't start off in a cloud environment, then you don't have a good way to be able to access your ongoing work. And so that's something to consider if you know you're going to be working on something and you want to make sure that you have access to it. In the drop down where they have the work trees, you might want to just kick off a cloud environment and do it that way from the start. Both Codex and Cursor have that option to run in the cloud. And I think those are great features. You would then be able to log into the app even on your phone and continue prompting to get things the way that you want them looking. If you have that integrated in some kind of a environment that does previews like Vercel, then you'd also be able to review the updates as they came up. Of course, to do that, you'll likely need to push up your branch. We're not going into all that detail yet, but in terms of the editors, doing a cloud option is viable and available in both Codex and Cursor agents. T3 code does it a little bit different. In their settings, they have a connections option. And so it's a little bit more technical in how to understand it. But if you have something like a Tailscale network set up, again, I won't go into all the details, but it's basically your own private network. You can leave your computer on with your T3 code instance running and make it available to your Tailscale network. And then if you were on another device that has access to your Tailscale network, you would be able to launch and work in that on that T3 code instance that's running on your other machine. And so it's accessing it via the network or the cloud, but it's not deploying anything in the cloud in the same way it would work with Codex or Cursor agents. I do like the ability to be able to access things that way. I still need to play with T3 code implementation for that a little bit more, But that is 100% something to consider if you want to be able to work, stop, and then keep working when you go somewhere else. I personally really like that. But my idea, since I do know that cursor agents works well on Linux, is that I might try out the cursor agents because I know I have a long trip coming up and I'm going to be away from my computer for a long time. I don't think I want to try and only access T3 code from my computer if for some reason a power outage occurs and my computers go down and then I can't access it and I don't have any way to turn it on without having somebody physically come over to my computer and turn it on. And so being able to do something like that in a cloud environment that's managed through some other third party could be super useful. So that is, but having done all this, I'm still heavily weighted towards favoring T3 code. I hope that they get the other features in place. But beyond the Telescale network type of connection setup that they have, I know they're building a T3 Connect plugin or option, which is supposed to simplify that whole connectivity. And I have signed up to the wait list for that, so I'm hoping to hear about that soon. Let me know what you guys think. So this was a monster kind of video going through everything. And so I hope that, I hope you guys learned something. I hope it was informative. If you guys got any value out of that, please subscribe. It helps out, all that stuff. And I'm very interested in which editor you guys would like to use or are looking at potentially trying if you haven't tried it before. And any nuances to these editors that I might have missed, shoot them my way because I would be interested in learning that information as well. So that is going to be it for this one, this very long one. And we will catch you on the next one. Peace, Quants.